Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute. We're constantly bombarded with headlines, right? But today, we're going to go a little deeper. We're connecting the dots between what seems like totally separate issues, political drama, wild weather, shaky economies, to really get a handle on the pressures shaping our world. To really grasp the big picture, we've got to start with the individual pressure points. Think of it like all these little warning lights flashing on the world's dashboard. Each one is blinking, each one is telling us something is up. And first up, we've got political gridlock. Over in the United States, a government shutdown is causing some very real, very immediate problems. And I'm not just talking about politics. We're seeing over 1,000 flights canceled a day because of staff shortages in air traffic control. That's a huge deal. Now let's switch gears from politics to the raw power of nature. In the Philippines, there's a massive evacuation going on. More than 100,000 people are literally fleeing their homes to escape Typhoon Fung-wong. We're talking about a super typhoon here, with just incredible amounts of rain and destructive winds. And at the very same time, geopolitical tensions are just simmering. You have major world powers actively making plans for large-scale conflict. Military alliances are drawing up contingency plans for stuff that honestly would have seemed unthinkable just a couple of years back. Okay, so with those pressure points in mind, let's dive into our first big theme. And it's this really strange, contradictory world of global power, where the threat of war is growing right alongside these surprising little glimmers of diplomacy. And this slide right here, wow, it just perfectly captures the split-screen reality we're living in. On the one hand, you have reports that NATO is prepping for a potential 800,000 troop deployment if the conflict with Russia boils over. But then, on the other hand, Syria's president is visiting the U.S. for the first time in almost 80 years. It's this bizarre snapshot of a world bracing for the worst, but still kinda hoping for the best. And it's not just about the superpowers. Underneath the main headlines, you have all these other regional issues adding to the strain. Peace talks between Pakistan and Afghanistan have completely collapsed, which is a huge blow to stability there. And then, in the digital world, this shadow war is heating up, with cyber attacks escalating between groups linked to Iran and Israel. So while all the world leaders are busy planning for human conflicts, the planet itself is sending out its own urgent warnings. And these are warnings that affect every single one of us. It doesn't matter where you live. Here's the number you really need to know: 1.4 degrees Celsius. That's how much hotter global surface temperatures are now compared to pre-industrial times. And because of that, 2025 is already on track to be one of the hottest years ever recorded. This isn't some future problem. The crisis is accelerating right now. And if you're thinking, okay, 1.4 degrees, what does that actually look like? Well, this table breaks it down. That single number isn't just an idea. It translates into very real threats. It's the extreme weather of Typhoon Fung-wong pushing thousands from their homes. It's the toxic smog in Delhi where the air quality has hit a severe level of almost 400. And as we look ahead to the next big climate summit, COP30, experts are saying the whole conversation is changing. It's moving away from making new promises and toward, okay, how do we adapt? How do we get justice for the people who were hit the hardest? The real challenge, though, this is all happening just as global attention seems to be fading, even as the crisis gets worse. Wow, it probably comes as no surprise that all this geopolitical stress and climate pressure is causing some serious turbulence in the global economy. It's creating this really volatile and uncertain environment where one shock can send ripples through the entire system. Let's just trace the domino effect of that U.S. government shutdown. It starts with a political fight in Washington. That leads to grounded flights, which then causes supply chain delays for businesses. And finally, it hits people in their wallets, with military personnel serving overseas not even getting their paychecks. It's a perfect, real-world example of a chain reaction. Meanwhile, the market seems totally confused, sending out these wildly contradictory signals. Look at this. Bitcoin, this sort of new-age digital asset, has rocketed past $89,000. At the same time, the price of oil, the bedrock of the physical economy, is falling, which usually means global demand is weakening. It just points to a very strange and jittery economic moment. And if you look beyond the big numbers, you see friction in these really critical sectors. The AI stock boom in Asia, it's cooling off thanks to tech tensions between the US and China. A boardroom fight over one single semiconductor company could actually slow down global car production because modern cars need thousands of those chips. And then you have this fierce, multi-billion-dollar gold rush happening in the market for obesity drugs. All these new economic battlegrounds are popping up. All right, for our final section, let's try to pull all of these different threads together. How do we make sense of all these interconnected pressures that are pushing our world and all its complex systems right to the edge? So here's the real question, right? Are these just a bunch of separate, isolated crises? Or is this one big chain reaction? Is the government shutdown somehow connected to the market jitters, the war planning, and the planet's warning signs? Are we watching parts of a single story unfold, pushing us towards some kind of breaking point? And that brings us to this idea of a tipping point. It's that critical moment when a system gets pushed so far that it triggers this huge, often unstoppable change. The source material talks about this a lot with climate, but you could easily argue that our geopolitical and economic systems are getting dangerously close to their own tipping points, too. And that really leaves us with this one final crucial question. In a world where all these political, environmental, and economic pressures are building up and crashing into each other, what's going to break and what's going to hold? That is the challenge we're all facing.